Hey, and welcome to Unlearning Stress, the podcast where we break the rules and cycles that keep you overcommitted, overstretched, and just plain exhausted, and replace them with something better. No fluff, no guilt, just real talk, real solutions, and expert insights to help you shift the way you live. Whether you're here for the first time or you've been with me for a while, you're in the right place. I'm Mischelle O'Neill, your resident emotional wellness coach, and I'm here to help you unlearn the patterns that are wearing you down so you can live with more ease, clarity, and control. Let's get to it. Hey, and welcome to Unlearning Stress with Mischelle, and I'm your host and resident emotional wellness strategist and coach. And today, as you can see, we have a special guest and with us to talk about advocacy and, advocacy with our loved ones. Woo, can't get it out today, can I? So let's welcome Erin. Erin, look, Erin, I'm gonna start right here because we have been talking earlier and we didn't get through it. How do you pronounce your last name?
Galyean.
Galyean. Okay. See, I would have messed that up. So I am so glad that I allowed you to say it yourself. Thank you. So, we had all kind of technical difficulties and everything, but you don't need to know that. Just know that we have the amazing, let me say this right, badass advocacy. Y'all know I don't cuss, but I had to say the name of her book. So anyway. Let's talk about Erin. When her sister Megan was diagnosed with cancer and with a serious lung disease in 2017, Erin was determined to be an unstoppable advocate for her. And with over 20 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry, Erin used her professional knowledge to ensure that Megan received the best care. Now, unfortunately, the aggressive lung disease would take Megan's life. But with the goal of turning tragedy into something positive, Erin decided to share her lessons through her book, Badass Advocate, and becoming the champion your seriously ill loved one deserves. So today, Erin shares her heartbreaking life events and the lessons that she learned so that others can make a difference in their loved ones' healthcare experience. And her book, Badass Advocate, includes 8 actionable strategies that are both effective and simple to follow. Listen, ladies, this is a must-get book. Erin also published a set of journals to help her caregivers better balance self-care with patient care, because that is so important. Now, through her book, journals, and her website will be in the show notes, Erin shares an abundance of valuable information that will teach families how to effectively navigate the challenges that they face. So welcome, Erin. I am so glad that you are here with us today. And you worked with me through all these little challenges today.
That's just life. When you work in corporate America, you deal with all sorts of technology issues. So not a big deal. We're here. We're going to have fun.
That's right. We're going to have fun and we're going to help these people. We're going to help these ladies during their caregiving journeys. And this is good information, not during just when you're going through this or when you're dealing with this, but it helps you prepare for that, because we're all going to, in some way, somehow, deal with caring for others or helping others in our lives. So that is so important. So I want to jump right in. Erin, you didn't plan to become a patient advocate, and we know that's something we never plan on being, but life actually pushed you into that role. So can you take us back to that pivotal moment when you realized that you had to step up? And then also, and you can ask me this again if you can't remember, and what that experience taught you about advocacy under pressure.
Yes. So my story starts, like you mentioned, in 2017. My sister, she had been dealing with some sores in her mouth for about probably 6 months. And she had gone to the doctor, she got tested, everything seemed fine. And then one day she woke up and was having a hard time breathing. She went to the ER, and that's when we found out that she had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. For my family, this news was devastating because we lost my dad in 1997 to the same cancer. It ended up that my sister's strand was different. It was a better strand, I guess, if you want to put it that way, because it was curable. However, the bad news was that the cancer caused an autoimmune disease. That was the sores in her mouth. That's how it was showing up. That autoimmune disease then caused a very rare and aggressive lung disease. So, really, to answer your question, the moment I realized I need to be an advocate was immediately. My sister and I were best friends since the minute I was born. We spoke to each other every day. She was 6 years older than me and was always kind and sweet and inclusive. She was a very unique older sister. I don't ever remember her kicking me out of her room or being mean to me ever. It's amazing. So I was really blessed with such a sweet, loving sister. And so there was no doubt in my mind I wanted to be there for her, even though I lived halfway across the country. Also, having lost my father when I was in college, it was kind of like a flashback for me where I wasn't in the same town or within driving distance of a family member that was sick. So I made sure this time I was going to be there as much as possible. And so I knew it immediately. The
Wow.
lesson, and then you asked me about the lesson, right? The lesson that I learned, is that what you asked?
Yes. What did that experience taught you about being an advocate under pressure?
Yeah, so what it taught me was, so you mentioned that I've been in the pharmaceutical industry my entire career. What my job is in the pharmaceutical industry is teaching sales reps how to ask good questions of physicians, how to connect with physicians and nurses. I saw that as my job. This now, what I did for so many years was translating to advocating for my sister. So all of this knowledge, this experience, these skills that I had built over 2 decades really came in handy. And so that's what I learned was that families get thrown into this situation, just as you said. We don't prepare for this. I think we should. We should prepare for it because most likely it's going to happen. Rosalind Carter, who just passed away recently, mentioned that she's a famous quote about caregivers. There are four kinds of caregivers. Those that, I might not say it in the right order because I don't have this in front of me, but it's something like this. Those that are caregivers, there's that were caregivers, those that will be caregivers, and those that will need a caregiver. So either way, we all will be impacted by this at some point in some way. So why not be prepared for something we know that's coming down the pike? At this point, my family was a little prepared because we'd done this with my father. My mom was probably the most prepared, but you're still caught off guard. It's an emotional roller coaster. It's something that you don't expect a 47-year-old woman to be diagnosed with cancer. I know many families go through this with young adults, children. It's shocking and it's an emotional roller coaster at times. And so that's what I learned is that these families get thrown in and they don't know what to do. They don't know the questions to ask. They don't know how to connect with someone who maybe has a different communication style. So that's really why I wrote the book, was just to help these families who are thrown into the healthcare system with no clue as to what to do next.
So what was the hardest part of stepping into that role emotionally and mentally?
Yeah, the emotion part was the hardest. As I mentioned, my sister and I were best friends, and she was young, and we'd already been through this. So there is, for all of us, there's anxiety, fear, that the fear of any of us getting sick after losing my dad at a young age. He was 53. And so emotionally, to see my sister in pain because that lung disease really, so she was a former athlete, a Division I field hockey and lacrosse athlete in college. She still was involved with lacrosse. To see her go from this very active mom of two who had so much energy to a very frail patient who could barely walk to the next room without needing help was very difficult and painful. And I think we also have some probably PTSD from seeing Megan go through that, which I'm sure many who are listening, if they've gone through it, can probably relate to that in their own situation.
Exactly, exactly. So caregivers and patient advocates often give everything that they have. And that's part of why I deal so much with the emotional wellness because it's an important part of this. But they give so much until there's nothing left. And we do it out of love for that loved one. We do it also by those unwritten rules of this is what you're supposed to do, or this is how you're supposed to behave. But what do you see as the biggest challenge for people in this role when it comes to protecting their own energy and well-being?
Yes, I think asking for help is the hardest thing, especially if you are the spouse or you're the parent or you are the adult child who is always the one who steps up. I mean, I feel like every family has that, right?
Right.
Usually for our family, it
I'm
was my
the
sister.
eldest.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's usually the oldest, right? So,
Yes.
asking for help is, I think, very challenging. So, I have a quote I want to share with you by Brene Brown that
Oh, I like her. I love her.
I do too. I love her too. We're best friends. She just doesn't know it yet.
Yeah.
But the quote is, when you judge yourself for needing help, you judge those you are helping. When you attach value to giving help, you attach value to needing help. The danger of tying your self-worth to being a helper is feeling shame when you have to ask for help. Offering help is courageous and compassionate, but so is asking for help.
Yes, yes, 100%. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
So I think that a lot of us who are caregivers, and I want to be clear, my mom was a primary caregiver. I think asking other people to come in and help you take care of or replace you for even an hour is very hard because we feel like we need to be the strong one. We need to be the one in charge. We know what they need. There's so many nuances to it. And we're protective of them and their space and their health. But in the end, and I'm sure we're going to get into this, you really do need to get comfortable asking for help because you are of no use. And I think this is the key part. You are of no use and no good if you then are sick and worn down and burnt out.
Right, and that's back to that old adage, pouring from a empty cup. But the other aspect of that is we as mothers, we as we're natural nurturers, most of us, and that's her baby. This is someone she brought into the world, so I understand that she's going through that. This is her baby, she's responsible, she didn't ask to be here. But then that natural tendency to nurturing, and then that growing up with, we are supposed to be the one to take care of, we are the one that knows the best way to do this. And then I was just talking to someone on a podcast the other day, and we were talking about the fact that, as women, what is your first toy? I mean, I'm asking you, what is usually, as a girl, what's your first toy?
Usually a baby doll.
Exactly. So what do you learn to do right there? And you learn
Nurture.
to care for
Take
it,
care for
feed
someone
it,
else.
take care of it, changes diaper.
Yeah.
Some of them even cry now, I think. But this is what you learn. It was a gentleman, Sean Atkinson. I said, "What do you get as your first toy?" And he said, "An action toy, a car." I said, "Exactly. You learn how to be a leader, to do things, to be fast, to do this, to be strategic."
Right.
And we're learning how to nurture and to love and to care. And so we carry that into every aspect of our lives. And when you see someone that you brought into this world, and they need you, that emotionally and mentally actually takes you back to the beginning,
Yeah.
when they needed you then, and when you were taking care of them then, and it just puts you back into that role. So uh, and most of us didn't ask for help then, except for me. I called the hospital every day. um
Yeah.
what do I do with this? But anyway, but the thing is, it is hard, and we had talked about of asking for help, and on two reasons. One, because we know what we're doing or whatever, we think we can do it faster, or easier, and to teach someone else. And this is a hard thing for most people, to teach someone something that you already know is hard. And at the beginning, it seems like it's taking longer.
Mhm.
But in the long run, it is helping you and saving you. So,
I
so
think a
now
big
with,
piece of that too is control piece, right?
yeah,
Yeah, that we want to be in control. First of all, we feel out of control in a situation when someone else we love is sick. We cannot cure them, even if you're a physician. You know, you can't always cure your wife or your husband or your child just because you're in the medical space, right? And I've had that conversation actually with physicians before when they've had sick loved ones. It's very difficult. It's even more difficult because they have guilt. But as a caregiver, that's not your job. Your job is to keep them comfortable, to give them what they need, to be their voice when they don't have a voice, but to make sure that you aren't also stepping over boundaries. If they have the ability to do things, don't just do it for them. That's not helping them either. So
Ask.
we want to ask, always ask. The patient, it's their body, right? It's their
Right.
life. So
Well,
always ask. They should be in charge when it's an option. Sometimes there are certain types of patients and diseases that they don't have a voice, and that's a different scenario.
and that's one of the things that I deal with my clients a lot with is also understanding the control issue because, and that takes me back to the Serenity Prayer. And one of the things they teach you as in different like Alcoholic Anonymous, different, I can't even think of the word that I want to use right now when you addictions, that's what I was trying to say, when you have different addictions is understanding what you can control and what you can't control,
Absolutely.
and understanding especially emotionally external things you have no control over, but what you do have control over is how you respond
Yes.
and how you react or act, and it is best to act and not react. And so all those things is a learning process as we go through the process of caregiving and understanding that that person is no longer the person that you used to know. I mean, even if your parent is still very able or that your loved one is still able, you're thinking when they do show the inability to do certain things, you're like, you did it before. And so that's a shift that you have to go through. Is like, oh, it's different. I know they used to think like this. I know they used to do this and they used to be quick, or they, for me, my mom used to cook all the time, but now I find myself doing more cooking for her, which is fine. And I have no problem with it. But you have to remind yourself that things aren't the way they always were.
So hard. And that's why I talk a lot about, and I use the word empowerment because I do, when Megan was sick, I felt out of control too. I felt like the world is spinning. I can't make her better. I can't make her feel better. As you said, she transformed into this frail patient. She was never that before. She was always strong and agile and this amazing athlete. So just to see that transition is, yes, emotionally hard for us as family members. It's also really hard for the patient. And because now they are not who they used to be and they can't do what they used to be able to do. So everyone's having a hard time. And so if we can feel like we have control of some things, that feels good, right? And that's why I wrote the book, because I felt like there are some things that you can be in control of. You can be in control of preparing for your doctor's appointments and asking good questions. You can be in control of helping them to make choices in their health care and making sure they have choices. You can be in control of giving up that control in some scenarios and asking for help and getting people to come in and give you a break or support you or go pick up something, the medication at the pharmacy. You don't have to do it all. There are people that are willing to help you, I guarantee. They just don't know what to do. That's usually the case.
So in your experience, what are the warning signs that someone is approaching exhaustion in their advocacy role? And how can caregivers shift from pushing through to advocating in a way that's sustainable?
Yeah, so at least in my family, it's irritability. Of course, exhaustion, and hopefully it doesn't get to that point, because when it starts to get to exhaustion and there starts to be like some health issues, they're really getting into a bad space. And that didn't happen in my family. I know it does happen, but in my family, it's irritability when someone is to the point where they are getting so stressed that they don't have patience with anyone, even possibly the patient, right? Because they're just overwhelmed and there's just too much going on. And it's too much to handle, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally. And so at that point, well, if we take a step back with my family, what we talked about because of our experience with my dad was making sure that we had a support team in place, which was, I'm very lucky. I come from a very supportive family, close-knit family of 5, right? When we lost my dad, so we were down to 4. But we made sure that we were there for my sister. And then we also made sure that my sister led the charge, even though she was physically ill. She could tell us who she wanted to bring into the mix. We have a cousin who she's like best friends with. She has a college roommate who she's super close with. So bringing those people in to support when my family as a whole needed it, because we're supporting Megan, but we also need support, right? We need to support each other. And that in the end, guess who gets the best support? She does.
Right,
Because
right.
no one gets to the point where they're losing it because we'll step in. So my cousin and my sister's college roommate, they didn't live around the corner, neither did I. So we would fly in and kind of all communicate and make sure we could relieve my mom, my brother, my sister's husband. We could relieve people from their duty in order to support and help. And then obviously, most importantly, be there for my sister.
And that is so important, of having that piece of people who are willing, because so often, and people don't realize this, is so often those people will fall by the wayside. So because they don't know what to say, they don't want to know what to do, or they don't know how to react to this person that used to be so vibrant. And so it was good that her friends were willing still to come in and support her. And that, I don't want to say is rare, but it doesn't always happen. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so two thoughts there. One is that I have to say that my sister is a very giving person.
Mhm.
So this is also, I think, a life lesson that I've taken away from my sister passing, just personally. The more you give, and you don't do it for this reason, but if you are giving to people and you are willing to be there for people, when you need it, people will be happy to support you.
Mhm.
If you are someone who is never willing to help, it's very hard then to turn around and ask for help. That makes it a little difficult. I'm not saying people won't help you, but that makes it hard because you weren't there for others. So she was so giving that it was amazing. I mean, we had so many people offering to help. There's also was a friend of hers in the town she lived who dropped off meals every Sunday. I mean, that's a
Wow.
lot of work. Home
Yes.
cooked meals. This woman's also amazing. She's like super mom. But so I don't know if I could maintain that, but like you could have a girlfriend or a male friend, doesn't have to be a woman, but someone in the neighborhood who organizes a meal train. There are so many ways that we can support a patient that doesn't have to be the day-to-day care. Have your teenage son or daughter take out their trash. My son loves taking out the trash of our elderly neighbor. He thinks he's so cool. He's only 8. He's like, I'm doing
Right,
something really
right.
nice for this like grandpa. So he feels good, but really he's helping a neighbor, and that's great. He's got lots of energy. Have him go do something.
And it's as simple as on trash day, uh, pull their trash can
That's
back
it.
in for them.
That's all he's doing.
That's all you're doing. And I know if once you start that, you start looking down the street and pulling in a couple of more,
And
just
he
because you're there, and
will.
you might as well, it's not hurting anything.
That's right. And
But
it feels good, right? You learn this
yes.
lesson of, this innate, like internal happiness, this dopamine hit of like, I just did something selfless for someone else. And like I said, you don't do it to get it back. You do it because it's the right thing to do and it feels good. But if someday you need help, I'm telling you, those people are willing to help you and step up.
Well,
It's amazing. And it doesn't have to be major things. Just one more point. You had said, I just want to add on to something you said. Sometimes people also don't want to overstep their bounds. So if it's a friend or a cousin, they may think, ooh, I'm gonna just stay back here, like, and maybe like send a text every once in a while. I want her to know I love her. Maybe I'll send her a card, but I don't want to step on anyone's toes.
mhm.
That is why it's so important that we have very clear communication. First with the patient, who do you want involved? Then someone is the representative and communicates with people in the family, friends, neighborhood, whoever your loved one has decided they want involved in this support team, as I call it. Some call it a care team, whatever
Right,
you
right.
call them.
Mhm.
badass team, whatever. But they come together. I can say it, so I'll use the word. But that they are very clear that they are included on the main support team and what their roles are. Not just these people that aren't in the immediate family, but in your immediate family, who's playing what role? Because it can get very sticky and confusing. So if I know I'm really good at asking doctors questions, I'm going to try and be there if I live locally, right? So my
Right,
sister's on
right,
the
right.
street. If I can be there to attend doctor's appointments with her and I'm really good at that, let me go. I'm happy
Mhm.
to. And if I can't, let's record the conversation with the doctor's permission and I can follow up and listen to it and help you craft questions for the next time. If someone's a great chef and they love to cook, heck, put them in charge of that weekly meal. What a blessing it is to do that.
Mhm.
So there's different ways. Teenagers, what are they great at? Technology, or they're 20 somethings, right? The millennials. They're so awesome at technology. If you want to set up that meal train, or there are websites that you can use to share
Right.
the journey of your loved one, I'm not the person to set that up. Your 85-year-old mother isn't the person to probably set that up. Maybe there is one out there that is great at that technology, but you're a teenager who loves technology, get them to do it. They're included and they're serving a purpose and they're helping.
And they're learning, especially if it's like their grandchild, if it's an elderly one and their grandchild is doing that, they're going to learn so much about their loved one and their life before and all that. Um, these are great opportunities for you to step up as an individual, but also to do teaching and to do legacy leaving. So there
Oh,
is
right.
so much here. I want to circle back. You circle back. I want to circle back on the warning signs. And the only reason I want to do this
Okay.
is because something else that we often miss or we just blow off is that fog, that brain where your brain is doing that switching and is not doing it as well as it used to. And that's because there's so much going on in there. I always think of it as our minds are just short circuiting because it's trying to hold all that information in. And one of the other things you'll notice is when you're stressed, you don't shift as quickly and you can't focus on more than one thing well. And so that's another warning sign. If someone starts saying, wait, hold up, I let me finish this, that means there's a lot on their mind. There's a lot that they're going through right now, and they're not up to par even emotionally and mentally at that point. And so there are quite a few, and I know you know all the warning signs, but the irritability and the frustration, easy frustration, and then that ability to switch is really really big and stands out. So
To your point, one way to help that is I talked about recording conversations briefly. That's something we did with my sister. We did not do that with my dad. It was 1997. We didn't even have cell phones back then.
mhm,
But everyone has a recorder on their cell
right.
phone, right? So ask the permission of the doctor. Explain why you want to record the conversation because you're going to share it with the core support team.
Mhm.
That way, other family members can hear what's going on. It makes you a stronger team because we all think differently, right? So we'll take my brother and I. The way when we listen to a recording, he may come up with completely different ideas, questions than I would because he's different life experiences, different thought process. So think of how that empowers us as a team in supporting my sister if we come up with 20 different questions based on one recording.
But you hear different too. Because
Yeah.
if you're listening to that recording, you may hear something that he totally missed, or he may hear something that you totally missed, or just even because and this is going too far, but even certain frequencies, different people have a understand hearing um issue there. And so he may hear high frequencies and you only hear low frequencies. And so he'll miss a question because the doctor was softer there or whatever. So all these things can be happening. And that's why it's so important to have this team. And like you said, listen to the recordings. I mean, that's something we do. And now with my mom, I go to her appointments with her because by the time she gets back from the appointment, I'm like, Mom, what did the doctor say? And she goes, oh, she said something about this or something. And I'm like, no, I need to go because I don't even think she's telling the doctor everything that's wrong, you know,
Well,
and
that's
those.
one piece of it. Yes, yes, I've experienced that myself with my mother. And she doesn't like me to come because then I rat her out for things. So I am a terrible daughter in that way, but it's all for her health. But the other thing is, when I've been in the patient seat, well, nothing serious, but I went through infertility treatments. And when I did that, I will never forget my first appointment with the fertility doctor. My husband couldn't make it at the time and I didn't have family close by. No big deal. Just an intro appointment to talk through
Mhm.
options. And he gives me all this information. I come home and my husband says, well, what did he say? And I'm like, I don't, I didn't remember. I didn't remember what he told me
Mhm.
because I was overwhelmed. I was so in my head and it's emotional. So that wasn't a life-threatening disease that I was facing. So just imagine when you get a poor diagnosis, a scary diagnosis, how mentally that's going to impact you, let alone if you have someone that has dementia or early onset Alzheimer's, something like that. You're dealing with other aspects, but
But I
having
was
is important.
right, but I was actually talking about the caregiver is dealing with this too.
Oh
Is
yeah, you're
is
right.
is you're trying to remember, oh, did I do their medicine? Did I and then someone asks you a question or say something to you and you're like, oh, I can't right now, you know.
Totally.
And when
Yeah,
you start seeing that
much.
happen, that's what I'm talking about. When that starts showing up a lot, your load is a bit heavy. Your load is too heavy.
I was reading on a website recently about caregivers and how these little things that you do, like I was talking about taking out the trash, your
Hmm.
regular life, right, is continuing on. So life doesn't stop. Let's say you're a full-time employee, you've got a family, and then your parent's sick. Your family isn't going to go on pause, right? Your 8-year-old
No.
isn't going to be like,
Right.
got homework for the next year, mom, in sports. I got it. No, that's not going to happen. So life continues. And then on top of that, you're taking care of someone. It's just too much. That's why you really need people to come in. And if you don't have family, we keep talking about family close by. I realize that's not realistic for most people. It's not even realistic for me. My family doesn't live where I live now. So that's when, if you can pull in friends, neighbors, and have them, give them some roles to play, that's fantastic. If you don't
Hmm.
feel like you have that, don't forget about nonprofits. Nonprofits are amazing. Most people that get involved with nonprofits or build them from scratch are because they were personally impacted by that
Right.
disease.
Right.
So they are so passionate about helping others, other families, other patients, that they offer so much. There are local nonprofits, there are national nonprofits. They have resources for patients, but they also have resources for caregivers most of the time, not all of them.
Hmm.
So many companies out there. It's a lot of research, which I know is very overwhelming, but just know that there are people out there. Join some group chats, Facebook groups. There's so many people that are willing to help, even if it's in small ways. It might not be every day-to-day caregiving. It may be the smaller things. The other idea is if you have a um, hospital nearby that has medical students or university, sometimes not for them to come in and do any medical treatments, they're not going to do that. But if you even need someone to sit with the patient while you go somewhere and they want some experience or just to say, like, I practice sitting with patients, they get some experience there, or someone that's like maybe considering going into that field, they may be willing to do some things that would help you and that you'd feel
Exactly.
comfortable leaving your loved one for an hour if they're in like a serious.
Right, right, right. And so one thing I hear a lot from caregivers is that they feel guilty when they take time for themselves. And in your work, how do you help people unlearn the idea that advocacy means sacrificing everything?
Yeah. To me, it's a mind state. You have to. So when my sister was sick, all I thought of was, I'm doing this for Megan. I would repeat that to myself. So mine wasn't so much the scenario you're talking about. Mine was stepping out of my comfort zone and maybe asking some very difficult questions of the physicians that
Mhm.
I really didn't want to ask in my heart. Also having some conversations with my sister because she was terminal at some point, we realized. These were
Right.
conversations I did not want to have with my older sister. She was the one who always protected me and looked out for me, and roles became reversed. And it didn't matter that we were grown adults. You know, you're stuck in that childhood
Yes.
relationship. And so, but I made myself do it. And so this mindset still works with what you're saying, with overdoing it and not, and realizing that it's time for a break and it's okay. You don't need to feel guilty. You need
Hmm.
to have the mindset that you're doing it for the patient. You're taking care of yourself for the patient.
Right. So,
Because, like I said, you'll burn yourself out and you're going to be no good to that patient. And then what happens? You're both in the hospital?
yeah, and that leads to your book, speaking of. So, in your book, you actually talk about balancing self-care with patient care. What's one practice or mindset shift that really makes a difference?
Yeah.
And
So I created a morning routine that is for caregivers. And I think starting off the day is the best time to do it.
Mhm.
Because once the day starts, the chaos begins. Because, like I said, if you're dealing with regular life, which everyone is, and on top of caregiving, it's going to start the minute you wake up. So if you can give yourself 30 minutes is ideal. If it's less than that, get what you can. But it's called the 5 R's. So the first one is reflect. So
Mhm.
take just a couple minutes to reflect upon your feelings, your thoughts, write it down. I have some journals, the Badass Advocate journals. They're on Amazon that will walk you through it, this process. But if you have the time to just think for just a minute, what am I going through? Just identifying it and calling attention to it will help you.
Mhm.
Then you can start thinking about your caregiving journey. Review your calendar, your personal, your caregiver journey journal, if they're the same, or sorry, planner, if they're the same, maybe they're two different planners, but make sure you know what's ahead for that day. The more that you're prepared for the day, the easier you can handle things that go awry, right? Or you won't miss things. You know, you have a conference call at work at 2 and you didn't realize that mom's appointment is at 1:30. Shoot, I'm going to have to email those people and ask if I can move that call. Or if mom's appointment isn't critical, can we call and move it to next week? So that way you're not like at 1:30 going, oh my gosh, we're leaving for the doctor's appointment and I have a conference call at 2. That's where the stress starts to set in, right? Because
Right.
your mind is just overwhelmed and it's just too much.
And don't
And
try to do it on your phone while you're sitting in the doctor's office.
that's right. And really you want to be 100% in both places,
Right.
right? So give them your attention. The
So,
third one is
oh, go ahead.
re-examine. And that's
Mhm.
re-examine the patient's care. Some days this part will take longer than others. If you feel like it's in a good space, then you can almost skip this step. Think about it. I think we're good. We can move forward. If you're in a place where you feel like something needs to be addressed with your loved one's care, this is the time to think about it, write down questions, set up that maybe follow-up appointment, message your support team, whatever needs to be done. Ask them, did you notice this about, I'll use my sister. Did you notice that Megan just didn't seem as clear or her breathing has gotten worse? Do we need to call the pulmonologist? Start to evaluate the patient's care and address and write down and figure out a plan for what's next.
Mhm.
Like I said, some days it'll be nothing, which is great. Then you can just move forward.
Exactly.
The next one is reevaluate. So
Mm.
reevaluate the support team. This kind of goes back to what you and I were talking about earlier. If there are 5, 6 people on the support team and someone's getting burnout, like mom, right? I'm starting to notice that my mom is getting irritable. She can't remember things, all the things we talked about. I want to talk to her about, listen, today, go do something for yourself. I'm here. I will go spend the day with Megan. We've got this. Go relax. It's not, doesn't mean that's her day to go to the grocery store. If she really wants to, fine. But I'd rather her go take care of herself and do, sit and read a book, watch a movie, whatever,
Yes.
take your mind off of it,
Mhm.
So support each other. Maybe it's just a little, I don't know, get together to have some fun and let loose for a little bit if you can, including the patient or not if they're not up for it. Or if they're in the hospital, can you all get together because you have a break because they're being taken care of and someone's there with them. And then the last one is recharge. And this will be different for everyone, but go do something that's going to recharge you and set you up for the day. For me, it's probably exercise. So that's why it could be 30 minutes or longer. But if you don't have that time, maybe it's praying or meditation, some type of self care, journaling, whatever speaks to you. Spend just at least 5 to 10 minutes doing that for yourself. So then you're ready to start the day.
Awesome. So what's something that you wished caregivers knew earlier about setting boundaries?
I wish they knew that it is okay to take time for yourself. And the best way to do that is to set yourself up for success. So on my website, I have a free downloadable. You can come up with your own. I just shared with you what I had created for my family, but it's a template. And basically, when my sister was sick, we had an aunt and uncle come down to visit. They wanted to see my sister. And then that gave my family a great opportunity to go. We didn't go very far. We went to the beach, but we took a little break. And my sister wasn't healthy enough to go, but she, like I said, had two young girls. So we all kind of took a little mini vacation. But how do we do that and leave my sister with an aunt and uncle that have not seen her since she's been sick? That's a little scary. So we basically like laid out a template and gave them everything they needed. Now we didn't go far. It was just like an hour away. So we could get in the car and go home if there's a crisis. But it gave us a break. And then we had everything typed up, everything very thorough. That gave us my mom more than anything, the ability to be comfortable leaving, because otherwise she would have felt really guilty. Now she knew my sister was in good hands and she would be okay. So just know it's okay. You need to do those things.
Exactly, exactly. And we do. We need to have a mental, physical, and emotional break in all aspects. So most people don't know how to navigate the healthcare system, and we keep talking about the healthcare system until they're actually thrown into it. So what's one thing you wish that every caregiver knew before stepping into an advocacy role?
Yeah. So there's two main things. I know you want one, but there's
Okay.
two that I think are really important. Number one, you have the right to ask questions.
Yes.
Always have the right to ask questions. Do not fear it. Do not feel uncomfortable. Don't feel like you're stepping on someone's toes. It is either your body or your loved one's body. It's your health. This could be a life and death situation. Even at the time, if you don't think it is, it could end up being that in the future. Hopefully not. Always feel that you are empowered to ask questions. Even if you're going to a yearly checkup, ask questions and go
You're
in.
paying them. I mean, you're paying for a service, so
Yes,
get what you pay for and more.
100%. I have my yearly GYN coming up in a month. Today, I was at the gym and I thought of 3 questions I wanted to ask her. So I went into my appointment on my phone and I wrote in the notes section my 3 questions I want to ask her, because I know what's going to happen. I'm going to get there a month from now and I'm going to be like, shoot, what did I want to ask her? And then I'm going to leave and I'm going to remember all the questions and then I'm going to be like, oh, now I'm not going to call her and ask her. It's just a yearly checkup. It's not critical, but they're questions I need answered. So make sure that you feel empowered to ask those questions. You have the right. That's number one. Number two, totally unrelated. I wish everyone understood the difference between palliative care and hospice. I can't tell you how many of my personal friendships I have taught them this and talked through it with them, because it is so important. If you are diagnosed with a serious illness or your loved one is, please, 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 please ask their doctor, and if they're hospitalized, ask the hospitalist about the palliative care team. Palliative care is not end-of-life care. Palliative care can deal with end-of-life care. It's part of it. Hospice, it's like palliative care is an umbrella and hospice is underneath it. So it is an aspect of what they do. But unfortunately, not only are people like you and I just in the community confused about it, but physicians are confused about it. So if the physicians aren't clear, and now not all, there are many physicians that are very well versed in palliative care, but if they are not clear and they feel like bringing in the palliative care team would scare the family and that means end of life, then they don't recommend it, that's such a disservice to this family. So my sister's palliative care physician, who actually wrote the foreword to my book, she came in. I honestly don't know who told her to come. I would hug them today if I could. She was such a blessing. She introduced herself. My family had never heard of palliative care. It did not exist really when my dad was sick in the late 90s. And so we didn't even know to ask. And now that I do, I will always recommend it. So palliative care is a team made up of physicians, social workers, psychologists. I mean, there's a whole gamut of professionals that are part of this team. And what they do is they support the care of the patient for almost everything but the disease. So you've got your doctors that are dealing with the disease. They are going to deal with your emotional and mental health and physical health when it comes to pain. So like pain management can be part of it. They also can support the family. I mentioned Megan had 2 young girls. Going to a hospital is a very scary place for children. It smells funny. There's people that seem very weird because you don't understand as a child that they're sick and they're making weird noises. So the palliative care team can help make that a more enjoyable experience by having like arts and crafts, doing things with, they did things with my sister. They did art and taped it up around my sister's patient room. That also brought my sister joy because they got to do something rather than just sit there and stare at each other and not know what to do and be uncomfortable. And then when my sister, towards the end of her life, the physician, the palliative care doctor, she gave her pain meds. She was in a lot of pain. And so she made sure to talk to my sister about that. She talked about end of life decisions that were very difficult conversations for us as family members to have with a 47-year-old sister and daughter.
Right.
It's not like she's 95 and we're like, okay, we need to have this conversation. By the way, don't wait till you're 95 to have that conversation. That's just an asterisk. Everyone should be having this conversation. But, you know, it's one thing if it's the end of life and it seems obvious, but when they're a young person, you don't want them to think you're giving up on them. And that's what palliative care can help navigate those conversations if it's uncomfortable for you. Hospice is end of life care. So my sister had both. She had palliative care in the hospital, and then right before she passed away, she was moved to a hospice facility. You're not always moved to a hospice facility, but it can be different scenarios. But just know, hospice is end of life care. Palliative care is comfort care.
Yeah. So it's got it. That distinction is really needed. A lot of people don't even know that they have the option, like you said, for palliative care. It's new to me, and I'm glad that you're talking about it, you know, that it's just really important. You know, we are going over time, but we are going to keep going. I'm just, this is such a much needed conversation. And so it may make our session long, but that's okay, because I think when people start listening, they're going to want to stay tuned. So I remember us talking in our pre-conversations, and you talked about that you worked in the pharmaceutical industry. So how does that inside knowledge change the way that you advocate?
Great question. So the big one, there's multiple things, but the big one was asking questions. When I train sales reps to ask questions, we talk about 2 different types of questions. One is open-ended questions and one is closed-ended. So open-ended questions start with what, when, who, where, how. And what happens is you elicit a more extended answer, right? It's more in depth because I've asked you, what are you doing tonight versus do you want to go out tonight? Do you want to go out tonight is a closed-ended question. Based with do, is, are, can. And those questions will elicit a yes or no answer. Those aren't bad questions. All questions are great. So just ask questions. But if you are prepared ahead of time, take your list of questions and look to see if any of them are close-ended. If they will naturally bring about a yes or no answer, it's a close-ended question. If you can take that question and flip it into a open-ended question, you are going to get more information from the healthcare provider. It just naturally happens. They are not trying to hide information from you. It's just human nature to answer the question the way that you phrased it. I'll give you an example. So my mother-in-law was sick and living with us last year. When I asked the doctor about exercise, I could have said, can she go for a walk? The answer could have been yes or no. A better question is to take that and say, what kind of exercise would be best for her? Now that just opened the door, right? So that physician could say, well, she could go for a walk for 5 minutes. She could do the exercise bike. She could get on the treadmill for a little bit. You know what? She also could take really light weights and kind of do a little bit of arm exercise, whatever. I'm just making up an example.
Right.
But the point is, The closed-ended question will give a short answer. The open-ended will give you more information. Normally, that's what normally happens. So that really helped because my brother and my mom and my brother-in-law, we would come up with this list of questions. This came over time. This didn't happen at day one when my sister was diagnosed, but we figured out how to get better at it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things we would do. We would basically have them all in the notes app. We would share it in the phone, come up with that list of questions, and then whoever was with my sister when the doctor came in or at the doctor's appointment, we would ask from that list. And they're all organized together. Eliminate any ones that are the same question, just asked a different way. And then if you can ask the nurse some of those questions, because the nurses, they are such a blessing. They're
Right,
such a wealth
right.
of knowledge. If
They are.
five of those 10 questions can be asked of the nurse,
Mm-hmm.
it's the nurse. That way, when you have time with the doctor, if he or she is cut short, you've at least gotten to the most important questions with the physician that only they can answer.
Well, and you have a relationship. You start forming a relationship with the nurses around there. So they get to know you and they're more free with their answers, and so relationships with your nurses are so important because they're the one that's doing the day-to-day, the hands-on care of your loved one when they're in the hospital or even when they're visiting. They remember more about your loved one. And
Absolutely. Take care
yeah,
of those nurses. If you can bring them like donuts or something, or
yes, flowers, whatever,
oh, they love it. They love
stuffed
snacks.
animal.
You want something, some fruit, they want something healthy,
Yeah,
bring them something. They don't get a lot of it's a thankless job a lot of
it
time.
is. It really is. My sister-in-law is a nurse, so I
Oh,
know.
yeah.
So now look, this conversation has really been awesome. So your story alone is a testament to resilience and determination. What advice do you have for the women who feel stuck in their caregiving role or helpless or inadequate in their caregiving journey and are unsure of what to do next?
Yeah. One of the things that I always recommend is talking to someone, a professional, if you can. Obviously you have my book that can guide you. There's lots of resources out there that can guide you with the advocacy part. But if inside you are feeling inadequate and you're feeling overwhelmed, which by the way, I don't blame you. We all feel that way.
Mhm.
I felt completely out of control, overwhelmed. My anxiety was through the roof when my sister was sick. I really struggled with anxiety, which I had never before, because she was my person. It's really hard to see your best friend just go through health issues. That's just loving someone, honestly. So go talk to someone. Go talk to a therapist. If you can't, for some reason, if you don't have insurance or you can't afford to do that, at least go talk to a friend. I think us
Mhm.
ladies are very good at that,
Oh
confiding in our
yeah.
friends. There are some of us that don't like to share our feelings. This one time, I think you should open up and pick one person that's a really good listener and has a lot of empathy. If you can afford, or if you insurance and you can go to a therapist, I highly recommend.
Yes.
I would do is find someone who's actually an expert in grief therapy, because what you're dealing with is very similar to grief. And if they are terminal, or even if like at this beginning of my sister's illness, we thought she was going to be fine, um,
Hmm.
that could be someone that could continue on with you and support you if something does go wrong. But either way, they are very familiar with illness because they're dealing with grief all the time, and it's very similar emotions.
I was gonna say, in a lot of ways, you're grieving while your loved one is still alive
100%.
because you're watching them. How do I? It's a type of dying when you're watching that change in them and they become less like themselves.
Yes, it's called something. I'm blanking on it now, but I follow a lot of people who talk about grief on social media and everything because that's the stage that I'm in with my sister, and they talk a lot about exactly that. When my loved one was sick, like especially people who have loved ones who have Alzheimer's, they are grieving. That person's gone, right? They're alive. Their body's there. Their heart's ticking, but they are gone. And I felt that too with my sister. Now, mentally she was, there, like could talk and interact and be herself, but physically she was different. And then towards the end, she just wasn't there, on all the medication she was on. So that it's a grief journey. It really is, watching someone go through it. And you're watching, there's so many aspects of it too, because you're also grieving your past life, but you're also grieving your future.
Right. And then you have that after grieving too. So it's like a long period of different aspects of grieving
Yeah.
that you're dealing with.
Yeah. So just everyone needs help. We're not taught
Yes.
when we're in elementary school. We have in high school and college, we have like tutors
Hmm.
for math, and we have a soccer
Hmm.
coach and all that, right? But how many of us have emotional health coaches? Not when we're young, we don't. We kind of figure it out in our family, and sometimes that works out well, and sometimes it doesn't. And so, if we as adults can get someone who's a professional to guide us and to give us compassion and to listen, just being heard is probably half of it.
Yeah. Girl, don't get me going down that road when you said that and that emotional intelligence and why our young generation today cannot deal with anger, frustration, don't know how to deal with not winning, knows it don't I won't go there. But anyways, don't
They
let
should
me go
come to you.
there.
You're the emotional wellness coach. Come to someone like you. You can handle it.
Yeah, don't let me go there. But anyway, and again, this is a powerful conversation, and I know people want to dive deeper. They want to understand even how they can be an advocate. My uncle just died recently. He had dementia, um, and his daughter is starting. I think she's going to start a nonprofit. We were going back and forth between the difference between a nonprofit and a foundation,
Mm.
and I think she decided on the nonprofit and
Awesome.
for
Good for her.
Alzheimer's, and she's becoming an advocate. And she was talking about the fact that when you go through that, I mean, it was years that she was going through this process. You have to become an advocate because you see the truth behind that wall that so many people never know or never see. And you want to help them not deal with the same thing. It's kind of like a mom where we try to tell our kids that the stove is hot and you get burnt and because we want to save you that pain.
Right.
And that's what advocacy does. It seeks to help others not go through the same pain or through that pain in the way that you did. And so I really commend what you do. How can our listeners connect with you and get your book?
Yeah. So there's a couple ways. Of course, Amazon, my book's on Amazon, Badass Advocate. And I have a website, just badassadvocate.com. So very simple, just the name of the book. I have on there my books. So if it's easier for you to go there and click, whichever works for you,
Mhm.
I have free resources on there. I also recommend some of these smaller companies that we might not know about that are very helpful. So I have a resource page of
Awesome.
credible companies. So if you click on that, you can go through, there's different ones, and I'm always updating it. So when I learn about new companies, in fact, I have a couple written down that I need to add to it because I'm always networking and just talking with people like you. Like you just mentioned your sister, and I hear about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. People need to know about it. So I'll put the description of the company, the name of it, and then a link, which is probably the worst business. People would be
I
like,
was
don't
going to ask, do you vet them first? Do you vet them before you just put them
I
up
do.
there?
I do
Okay.
I get to know them. And then I'm like, oh, I love what you're doing. I'm going to share what you're doing. But what I mean is people would always say, you shouldn't have links to other businesses on your website, but I don't care. I'm not doing this for any other reason than just to help families like
Do
mine.
you know how many people are in the world?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And here's the thing. We all need help. I know what it's like. You're thrown into a situation and then you're like, well, I need help with this. Well, if I know a company that can help with that, and even if I don't know you and you happen to visit my website, well, why wouldn't I want to share that? That this person has a camp for children who are grieving. That's amazing. Awesome. So Yeah, so I will, so those companies, I also have a company, or a couple of websites, not company, websites that we used in pharma to do research when you want to find a study on a disease. So people might not know where to go. They're like government websites, so they're free to the public, but doctors use these, pharmacists use these websites, and we just wouldn't know that they're out there. So things like that are shared. Um,
Awesome.
and then, yeah, and then anyone can email me if I'm always open to receiving emails, Erin@badassadvocate.com. I do lots of podcasts. So, and then I'm on social media, so you can find me there as well.
Yes, and I will be putting your links and everything down in the show notes, so don't worry about it. But for those of you who are listening, just hang with me a minute so we can talk afterwards. But for those of you who are listening, if today's episode spoke to you, share it with someone that you know needs to hear this. And please note that we may not get to all your questions, as some may naturally be answered, by others, within others, So I just want to thank you for being here. Make sure you put comments, because I will make sure Erin gets them. If you have questions, like I said, I will make sure she gets them. And I am so honored to have you here as my guest today, Erin. We'll get in touch later, but I am honored to know someone who understands how harrowing the road to caregiving is, and is an advocacy for that role. Um, it is a role. It is a role that a lot of us will take up this year or in the future, and that a lot of us are actually walking through right now. And we want you to know that we hear you, we see you, and we're here for you. Thank you again for being a part of Unlearning Stress with Mischelle. All right, Erin, let's say bye-bye. Thank
Thank you so
you.
much.
If this episode hits home, don't just push it aside. Lean into it. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And connect with me on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Substack, where we go even deeper. Links will be in the comments. And if you're ready to start unlearning the patterns that keep you stuck, keep listening, because real change happens one choice at a time. I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.